Well, Fanalysis combines the analytics of fantasy football with the metrics of sports betting to find you the best angles every week. And we are joined now by a sports investment analyst from Sports Grid, Jared Smith, joining us once again. Jared, top plays are always the biggest, I guess, the biggest target of the week, trying to find the exact angle, trying to find the sharpest angle week in and week out. And this week, for your top plays, you're starting with the Vikings and the Packers in that game. Again, this is a division rivalry. Green Bay, though, favored by 7. Aaron Rodgers, though, has feasted on inferior defenses. But does Minnesota's defense qualify as inferior?
No, actually. In fact, if you looked at the numbers, if you stack these teams up, tail of the tape, it's actually Green Bay's defense that I would say is slightly inferior. Minnesota checks out, analytics-wise, Steve. We talk about this a statistic that I really dive into every week is net yards per play. And net yards per play, what it does, it takes your yards per play, which is always positive, and then your yards per play allowed, which is obviously kind of a negative number, and it combines the two. And the sum of that is a very important statistic, net yards per play. It means, are you outgaining your opponents by more than what you're giving up? And when you look at the net yards per play numbers between these two teams, they're almost dead even. Green Bay 12th, Minnesota 15th. Then you dive a little deeper, you go into defensive efficiency. Minnesota, again, kind of a middle of the pack team against Green Bay, which is in the bottom half of the defensive efficiency ratings. Now, obviously, this game is going to be dictated by how much Aaron Rodgers can move the ball up and down the field. But on the other side of the ball, I think Dalvin Cook coming back, and we're hearing from Mike Zimmer that they expect Dalvin Cook back this week. Again, Minnesota off of their bye week. So some rest for Cook. He could control the tempo of this game and keep Aaron Rodgers on the sideline. So that, to me, is a big factor in this game. Dalvin Cook and the Vikings running the football. We've also seen some of that reverse line movement we talk about, Steve. Most of the action, as you would expect on Green Bay, they've been one of the most publicly bet teams all season. But the line has pretty much frozen right at 7. In fact, I'm seeing a little fluctuation towards 6.5 in some markets. So I'm not going to fade that contrarian sharp movement at this stage in the season. The analytics speak to that a little bit as well. I think the Vikings are a good play this week getting the points.
You mentioned the return of Dalvin Cook, and clearly it seems like the Packers do have a vulnerability in defending against the run.
Absolutely. And that's actually been the one thing that's prevented me from putting Green Bay in that upper echelon of teams this year. And I think it's going to be what trips them up in the postseason. So Green Bay might look really good on paper early in the year in the regular season, but when things get tough, when teams start to run the ball a little bit more and they rely less on the pass later in the season, when the weather gets a lot colder, gets pretty cold in Green Bay from what I've checked recently, there's going to be a change in your approach. You're not going to be able to throw the football down the field on every play. You're going to have to run the ball a little more. Green Bay struggles to stop that. And Green Bay's defense in general has been bad this year. The last few games, Adam Thielen has played against this Green Bay defense. He has feasted. So even their secondary is vulnerable as well. I think the Packers defense is what's going to prevent them from being a championship team.
Even with Alexander against Thielen in this matchup?
Actually, that's been the matchup that Thielen's feasted on. The numbers for
you take one of the best corners in the NFL, and Adam Thielen just dominates this guy.
It's crazy. He had 6 for 110 and 2 touchdowns in week 1. So, and he's had at least a touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games going up directly against Alexander. Now, some of those games might have been shaded with Diggs in the lineup. Now Thielen being the top guy. But on the other side of the field, Steve, you've got Justin Jefferson, who's been arguably more explosive and better in his rookie season than Thielen is starting to look. They're different receivers. It's apples to oranges. But you can't just shade on Thielen and let Justin Jefferson run wild. I think the Vikings play well this weekend. They're coming off the bye. They've been beaten down. The narrative is going against them. That usually is when teams bounce back a little bit.
All right, we're going to stick with the division rivalry here because the Steelers right now are getting 3.5 or 3.5-point dogs in Baltimore. We've made it halfway through the season, and only one team has remained undefeated, and that team is an underdog. Please explain. How does Vegas reconcile this for us?
I don't know if it's one of those things in the NFL, Steve, that the lines do tend to play tricks on you sometimes. And that's where the sharp and the line movement can help you, but also it can confuse you sometimes. This line movement makes sense. The Steelers are an underdog. The narrative says Pittsburgh should be one of the better teams in the NFL. They're undefeated. They've looked the part. Their defense is great. And the line's moved in their direction. It opened 5.5. We're seeing it push towards that key number of 3. I don't think it's going to get on the other side of that key number because you do have a Ravens team that's very well rested. And you have a Pittsburgh team that is battling, I don't want to say some physical issues, but they had a very physical football game on Sunday against Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans, where he was smashing the line of scrimmage 20, 30 times in that game. And I could see a little bit of fatigue for Pittsburgh. They've played as well as any team has played this season, but they haven't been blowing teams out. They've done just enough to win every week. That Denver game a few weeks ago, I remember, it seems like they were just doing enough to get over the hump. Pittsburgh does have this way of playing up and down to opponents. And this matchup, you're going to give me points in this matchup, Steve. It's hard not to take it. I don't love backing public dogs, but I can't not take the points with Pittsburgh. Of all my top plays this week, this is probably my least favorite of the 3, but it's respect. They're undefeated. They're getting points. You got to take them.
I think that's it. I think the undefeated is almost like a big weight that's hanging over them this entire year. And until somebody knocks them off, they're going to have a massive target on their back. And you mentioned that line movement from 5.5 to 3.5. Is this one that you might want to jump on? Are you afraid that it could bounce back up?
Maybe. I could see it maybe closing at 4, but I'll be honest. I think because the Steelers are going to get the majority of the action here, I would be shocked if it moved in Baltimore's direction. So I think actually if you want to bet the Steelers at 3.5, there's a chance this could close at 3 on Sunday. If it does, I might take my 4 that I got with Pittsburgh earlier in the week, and I might take a 3 with the Ravens. But right now it's hovering in that 3.5 range. Listen, this series, and you've been covering football a long time, Steve. This series is not for the faint of heart.
Oh man, it's a division rivalry.
And this is probably the fiercest one in the game right here.
How good do you have to be if you take a line with a 1-point difference and you want to middle a line with a half-point difference between the two? That is, are you that sharp, Jared?
No, I'm not. It's almost, and I've done this a few times in the past. I've gotten lucky once, and most of the times it comes outside of that range. Middling lines in the NFL is probably one of the hardest things to do. This is really just one of those games that I would be shocked if a team won by more than 3. Yeah. So if you're going to give me Baltimore at 3, I feel good about that. And this is a lot of respect for Baltimore too. They've been good off the bye under Harbaugh, 10-2 straight up, 9-3 against the number. So I think this is a tough spot for both teams. Pittsburgh certainly is in a tough spot because they're facing their biggest rival fresh off of the bye. That's right. Pittsburgh is coming off of a tougher spot. But on the other side, the Steelers are getting points and they're unbeaten and they always find a way to win. So it's kind of a pick your poison game. But I think if you're going to give me 3 and the hook with Pittsburgh or anything more than that, I think it's hard-pressed not to take it.
One of your other top plays is Chicago against the Saints, and that line right now is at 4. The Bears, they're 5-2, but they've been dogs for 6 straight games. Are the bettors just not believers in this Bears sputtering offense?
Yeah, and I think based on what happened on Monday night, you're not going to get any fuel, for that fire. Nick Foles looked very average at best, and the Rams defense certainly did a good job. But I think Matt Nagy also has some questions to answer just with the game plan and kind of how they scheme. So you get the Bears now on a short week coming off of a tough road game, and now they travel back home, which is certainly favorable. But they're facing a New Orleans team that I think is looked at a little differently by the public than some of the sharp bettors. I think the public is starting to come off of the Drew Brees bandwagon a little bit. I think he's looked relatively average on paper, especially when you're watching his games. He's not throwing the deep ball that well, and that's kind of been the narrative and the Michael Thomas drama and all these things happening. But New Orleans has one of these ironclad schemes, Steve. It doesn't matter who's playing. It doesn't matter who's on the field. As long as Drew Brees is on the field and as long as Sean Payton is coaching, they seem to find a way to get things done. And analytically, this game is just, it points everything in favor of New Orleans. We talk about that net yards per play. This is one of the biggest discrepancies of the week in terms of a rank versus ranked team. 25th Chicago is ranked in net yards per play. New Orleans is top 10. And defensively, we think of Chicago as this great team. They are. They're top 10 defensive efficiency. So is New Orleans. Yeah. So they bring a really good defense on the road with them as well. You're going to be without Michael Thomas in this game on one side, but also Allen Robinson concussion protocol. That's the biggest weapon for Chicago. You take away Nick Foles' best receiver. Tough spot for the Bears. I think the Saints go in there and put a big whooping on them. I think this is my favorite play of the week. New Orleans a little bit undervalued in the marketplace, only laying 4 here.
I feel like an interesting stat that maybe We here in New York who have watched a lot of Jets games don't understand the importance of third down conversions because the Jets have been at the bottom of that list, year in and year out. But the Saints are converting. By the way, the Jets are converting at like a 20% clip. The Saints are converting third down percentage at 55%. That is number one in the NFL. That is a way to extend drives, extend series. This keeps the defense off the field. Maybe that's why the defense is a top 10. But this week,
100%.
they're facing the sixth best defense in the NFL. Does that nullify the third down percentage rate, which allows them to keep those drives alive?
A little bit. I think this is going to be a pretty tightly contested game. I mean, I don't think this is going to be a 3-4 touchdown blowout where New Orleans gets in there and takes care of business from start to finish. I do think Chicago will show fight. They've shown fight all year. The issue I see is I don't think Chicago's offense is going to stay on the field long enough to make that defense sustainable. We saw it at the end of that Rams game, Steve. That defense, that very good Bears defense, just ran out of gas. And I think that's what you're going to see from the Saints on Sunday. I think they're going to be able to stay on the field long enough to just do enough. But then towards the end of that game, once the Bears offense goes 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, you're going to see it wear on the defense a little bit as well. That's how these Bears games have kind of been. They've been a little tilted. Yeah. They've really they started okay in that game on Monday night, but it just fell apart late. And I could see a similar scoreline, a similar game narrative, game trend on Sunday afternoon in Chicago.
Well, they're probably going to want the oxygen on the sidelines for this game, and they're going to be using it in the fourth quarter. Jared Smith, thank you so much for your insights, man. That is a look at Jared's top plays of the week. Make sure you check out the other segment on why the Jets and the Giants games might not play out like you'd expect. For Jared Smith, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.